I haven't done a talk like this in ages, specifically about icon design. This is the first time I'm doing it. Hello everyone, I'm Carlos. I'm a designer. I work at this little bank called ANZ. I also work for Mental Group, who's sponsoring for this place. But yeah, I've done some icons in the past. Maybe some of these are familiar. That one, my favorite one, that's Reveal. It's a really good Mac app for helping you inspect iOS applications. I've done some work for Sketch. I did some replacement icons. I used to build a Mac app. That's now defunct. And I did some icon work. I'm doing some freelance icon work as well across the community. And this one's for an app called RideStats. I believe the developer is here with us today. Speaking of, I want to focus my work on these icons. So this was an amazing opportunity for me to work on some exploring 3D icons. And it started out with just one icon, but then we decided to do, what if we just extended the set to have more than just one icon and have a library, a suite of multiple different app icons, or rather icons within the app. Yeah, I don't know. There's something about 3D icons that just really make it pop on the screen. And I'm going to show you how I designed these icons. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to focus on this icon right here. So the design goal we had was to come up with an icon for the Watch app, for the Watch app. And the constraints were it had to fit in a circle. It had to look really good on the watch. It's a tiny icon. And so we wanted to use an opportunity. Why we could just put like a flat image on a circle and call it a day. But we wanted to do more than that. So I decided to explore a bit of 3D with the icon. So how do you design a 3D icon? There are 5 steps. I'll walk you through how I went from start to finish for that watchOS app icon. So first one, I start with sketches. I go straight to the screen. And what I do is I sort of do a bit of back and forth with the client about how, what should the icon look like. I originally started off with there's this, I forgot what the device is called, but it sort of helps you measure and track a cycling computer, I suppose. And you put it on the sort of your handlebars of your bike, and it tells you your distance and how you're going with your bike journey. And we wanted to sort of put that and hero that idea of a device on the watchOS app icon. Trouble is, we could put a square in there, and it's hard to know what that means. Maybe we could add a little path. The whole idea of the app was it's about statistics. So we drew a little graph here just to show that it's collecting stats. And just to give it a bit more of an idea about how it's tracking your journey, we decided to add a sort of location arrow. And that's sort of the starting point. There was a couple of iterations. I'm just cleaned it up here into this really simple glyph. And then now that we've got the basics, I decided to explore colors. What does it look like once I start to add a bit of color, give it a bit of layers? So the middle there is supposed to be like the bike computer in the shape of an Apple Watch. And then you've got the stats, so it's much sharp on the purple background. And the idea is you could sort of see your path on the GPS, but it kind of lines up with the statistic in the back. Now that we've got the colors up and ready, let's add a bit of style. So this is just adding some like gradients, adding some shadows to the colors and shapes that we have here. From afar, it already looks 3D, but wouldn't it be cool if we added a bit more detail so that when we decide to blow up the image and put it elsewhere that isn't just the watchOS app, you could sort of see a bit more, a bit more extra character. So the next step is turning what we've got there into something that's more like a 3D scene. So a bit about 3D. How does that work? I use an app called Blender, and how it works is it's sort of like a bit of like a stage here, really. And the idea is you're given like a blank stage, a 3D scene, and then whatever you want to decide to put in that scene, you have to model. So you have to put in an object in that scene, and then you have to adjust the lights, and that will determine what it looks like. So for example, someone here in the front row may see this table over here. You can sort of see the lights coming down on it, you got some shadow, and then someone in the front row can sort of see that there's some shadow pointing that way because the light is facing that way. Now, what you could sort of imagine what it would look like if I decided to move the lights that way, the shadows would move. That's sort of the first part of setting up a 3D, like drawing a 3D icon. That's what it looks like in Blender. It's a bit complex. It's a really crazy learning curve, but there's this really popular tutorial that shows you how to draw a donut, which some of you may have probably already seen. But this is how I set up my scene for designing 3D icons. This right here, that's the camera. So that's like, what does the camera see? So this is the plane. This is like the stage. I've got a camera pointing downwards. Just imagine the camera's like that vent over there. I've got two lights, somewhere here and then somewhere there, sort of like one of these lights. And the idea is, now that I've got my stage set up, I can put whatever object I want designed in this area. This is sort of what it looks like from the camera's perspective. So that thing pointing downward, imagine if you put a camera where that was and you're looking down at the object, that's sort of what it looks like. And for whoever designed the icon, that's sort of like the end result. So you can imagine if I was designing a watch icon, which is sort of this circle here, the camera up there, the image that the camera see would be a circle and whatever we designed here. Next is modeling. So it's actually putting stuff in the scene. What does that look like? I do something a bit different to how maybe the 3D modeling community would do it. I do a bit of a hack. What I do is, from my design file, I export my shapes as SVGs. What's really cool about Blender is you can import SVGs. So what I'm actually doing is I'm importing flat objects into a 3D world. Of course, when you put a flat object in 3D world, it won't look 3D. It's just like this top part of this table. But when you put the camera above it, it sort of looks like what we're looking for. The goal is to turn these flat objects into something 3D. So I don't have to like draw a circle from scratch. I don't have to figure out how to draw this in Blender. I just throw the shapes in that my 2D drawing tool can already do really well. If we decide to tilt the camera, this is sort of what it looks like. So if I move the camera from here to here, you can see they're just like a bunch of flat objects stacked on top of each other. So the goal, let's give it some depth. So let's start with the bike computer here. So it's a flat shape. Now what I do is I extrude it within Blender. So there's an option on the sidebar that allows you to like give it depth. Then what I do is, in order to make that indent where that sort of like screen goes, I duplicate the object, make it slightly smaller, and I push it down into the big object, to the object. Then, if you know Boolean operations, subtract, and bam, we've got like a nice little tray-looking thing. And if viewed from the top, it looks like our computer, and it's got depth. If we turn it to the side with the camera, it looks like this. It's looking pretty good already. It's quite nice. And then let's just change the color of that SVG to the black that we had earlier. And even just with a few things of like extruding the object and putting something in to push that well in, it kind of looks pretty good already as a 3D object. And that's just the base of that's just one element. Now you can start to see how that applies to all the other elements in the scene. So if you remember that flat disk, what I did was I extruded it, maybe gave it a bit of a round edge. We've done this already. This one was fun. It was a flat object, but what I did was I extruded it, and then I gave it, there were 3 points in the arrow. What I did was I clicked the middle dot and then raised that slightly higher. So it kind of looks like it's pointing downwards. So it's kind of looking like a triangle like that. So you don't just have to extrude it, you can sort of just like change the way it looks in Blender or in whatever 3D software tool you use. And then if we look at it from the top down again, it's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good for a 3D scene, which is quite nice. And this is just the shapes we started earlier, just extruded. And that's a bit about modeling. The next step is giving it some texture. That's adding materials. So this is what that looks like. Okay, so this is our watch disk. Imagine this again. And if you remember our icon from earlier, just we go back to our original concepts. It had this sort of like purple color with like a line over it and some kind of gradient. How am I going to do that in Blender? Well, I don't have to. What I can do is I can select the 3D object and then slap on an image on top of it. And it sort of wraps around. It's like adding a sticker over a real world object. There you go. I can just call it a day because that's a texture for it. It's pretty good already. I don't have to do anything. And if we sort of like put it into our lighting, if we turn on the lights and camera, this is what it looks like without doing anything else, using the scene that we set up earlier with the lighting and the cameras and with the texture applied. It looks really good already. If it was just a flat image, it wouldn't have this sort of shadow and sort of lighting, but it was sort of like pushed out because we did some modeling there. Now, let's do something similar to the bike computer. So this one, it doesn't have a texture. It doesn't have like a fancy image on the actual 3D model. So let's actually do some old school, well, not old school, traditional 3D modeling with this one. Let's actually give this a proper material. And what's cool about 3D modeling is you can use whatever material you want. This is pretty boring. I just chose like a black material, but in another situation, you could make this out of leather. Just change the outside to use a leather texture if you really wanted to. Or you could make it out of wood. I just chose plastic because that's what the bike computers are sort of made out of. I tried my best. I actually tried to study like what does it look like in certain lighting, and I tried to recreate the texture of it inside Blender. But that's just too much time finessing detail over black plastic, so it just looks like a black plastic object. So I decided to spruce it up a bit. Let's give it a screen. So that looks interesting. I used the same technique that I did for the disk and slapped an image inside the screen itself instead of having to draw this in Blender. So it's actually an object with two different textures, the black plastic and an image that sort of serves as the screen. And then if we put this thing over the purple circle that we had earlier, it's starting to take shape. You can see the 3D object, because it's extruded, has a bit of nice shadow there. We're using the statistic grafting at the background. We've got our cheeky lineup of the GPS track. And there's one object missing, and that's the arrow. For the arrow, what I did was I gave it a metal sort of texture. Just turned into this silver thing. So I suppose if I move the lighting around, it would have a bit of shine. But I left it as is because I wanted to keep the icon simple. And that's actually quite important. Sure, you've got this playground of 3D objects and you could throw all the textures you want. But remember, your job is still, as an icon designer, to keep it as clean and as simple as possible. So it's just adding that little bit of extra detail where necessary. And that's what it looks like. In order to sort of make it pop a bit more, I decided to add a bit more extra lights in the scene. It's a bit like having a bit more spotlights this way onto the scene. So what I did was I added one more light down here and then gave it like a glow. So it kind of gives it a bit more depth. The last and one of the most important things is actually getting your thing outside of Blender, getting your 3D object back into the 2D world. So what I do is I render it through using Blender. So I hit the render tool, and the output looks like this. Looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I can adjust the lighting if needed. And what's really cool about 3D, doing icons in 3D, rather than just doing it all, like recreating the shadows in your design tool is that if let's say I'm the client and I said, hey, I don't like the way the light is up there. Can you make the light just come from here instead, so the shadow's that way? It would take me a whole day to redraw it all inside the design tool I've got. But because it's Blender, I just take the light bulb, move it down here, and hit render. Much quicker. So what I then do is I take this out of Blender, chuck it into your design tool of choice. Here's Sketch, and I have Apple's template for the watchOS icon. So all I have to do is just drop it into the template and hit export. And that's it. That's the finished icon. And yeah, that's how you design 3D icons. I guess we have question time after this.
Well, what were you going to do with this?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Okay, so one more thing, I guess, in the style of Apple. This book came out. I got published, one of my icons that I worked on got published in this book, which I'm really happy about. What's really funny though is, if you find it in bookstores, that's the icon I designed, which is awesome. But if you look closely, they spelled my name wrong. It's C-A-L-O-S. So I guess it's not me. Some guy named Carlos is in here.
We want to show the online audience as well. Just shuffle across.
Oh yeah, sure. Here's the book. And here is the icon. And if you, I guess I could use this to show the misspelling.
Oh yeah,
Oh, if we can. Oh yeah, good job, Kalos.
Nice.
Yeah.
Question time.
Yeah. All right.
Any questions?
I have a question and a comment. My comment is more like Carlos is the name you misspelled rather than Melegrito. That's it.
I'm very impressed by that.
Very
yes,
strange.
Exactly.
I don't know if you mentioned earlier, which app was it that the icon that you did there? Which app was that
that's
for?
right. So the app is called RideStats. Developers right here if you have any questions. Yeah, it was an amazing opportunity because we got to do not just the watchOS icon, but a whole bunch of other icons as well.
So I think the last slide answered my question already, but while you were creating the objects and putting them into 3D space, did you always have a viewport open that showed you the 2D flat icon, for lack of a better term, so that you would see exactly what it would look like on 2D or at all times? Or did you have to switch between the 3D scene and the 2D results back and forth? Or did you have that in real time, basically?
That's a really good question. Yes. Is it possible to get the slides back up? So I customized, so what you're looking at here is a custom Blender setup that I have, where I've got 3 windows. I've got the modeling that I'm working on there, and then over there. I've got like the textures here. It's actually swapped. That's supposed to have textures, and this is the modeling. And I've got the preview that you're talking about here. So it's so I can sort of see and play around with the lighting, see if it's working better. And that's actually how I decided to add one more light into the scene, because it wasn't giving enough color. So yes, I do have a preview.
You work in that top left quadrant, and then the 2 others are just like read-only. You just look at them.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you have to consider like what it looks like in monochrome at all, or
Ooh.
or like accessibility, like sort of color blindness in it? Yeah, dark mode. Yeah, another good one.
I will put the caveat that this is pre-iOS 18, so no dark mode. Monochrome, technically yes. The first version of this, if we go back to the concepts, was monochrome. So
Nice.
I have to scroll all the way back, sorry. But yeah, I always start with making sure it stands out without color first. So that way we're not relying on color too much. So that everything here becomes a bonus to look like this.
Question, any thoughts about actually turning it into a real 3D object? I know the developer of the app plays with 3D stuff, so any thoughts of actually turning it into a real, so you actually can get a real icon that you can hold in your hand? And
That'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be cool. Maybe.
Hi. Was it much of a conscious decision to make an icon that can be more than one thing? Like when you're sort of talking about it being a graph my brain didn't go there at all. Like my brain went straight to that's a GPS signal. Like, did you sort of find that a lot of people pick one or the other, or like when they're sort of like interpreting the icon?
Yeah, no, I didn't think about it that way. It's funny
Got
you
another
say
answer.
that there are different ways to interpret the icon, but I don't know, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, like that is exactly the thing. It's not only a graph, it is a cycling route as well. So there is definitely that duality to it, and it's really well done.
Any other questions?
Is there such a thing as too much 3D? Can you overdo it?
Yes, actually, yeah. I don't know, subject to taste, but you might end up with something that looks like the Find My app from way back then, if you go back to Skio. I've never really tested that bound before, but that would be fun. Yeah.
One more question.
Have you got some future plan to do some dynamic icon? For example, like the arrow can pointing to a certain angle.
I don't have it here, but I did. So maybe download. Maybe is it in the app already? Yeah, download the app, and you'll see that one of the loading screens is actually this. It's obscured, but this bicycle. The wheels move in the loading. So if you're waiting for the app to load, the bicycle wheels actually move. There's like a little thing that spins. So yeah, I do some animation as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlos.
No worries.